everyone, and welcome into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in again this week. Another great show we have today. Al Stall Jr. will join us, and later on, another trainer who ran just behind him in the Stephen Foster, Bret Calhoun. So that's who we have on the show today. Naturally, around this time of the year, we would, in any other year, be talking about, wonder what's going to happen with the Triple Crown runners. Are they going on to the Haskell? Are they going on to the Travers? There's some talk about this, of course, as well. That being that going to the Travers will be the Belmont Stakes winner this year. 'Tis the law. But Uncle Chuck had a win in the Los Alamitos Derby the other day, so Bob Baffert's back on the scene. He had so many injuries, sidelined some of his horses, so that's been a different way this year. And the whole point of all this is we can't talk about who ran in the Derby or in the Preakness. We can talk a little bit about who ran in the Belmont, like Max Player moved up, Dr. Post moved up on the 3-year-old scene. But the big thing this year to me has been that the older horses are getting more attention earlier than they usually do. And with me again on lead guitar, Ben Chaffins. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Kenny.
And our ace researcher, Mr. Thomas Kenny. Hello, Mr. Thomas.
How you doing today?
Good. You've been looking into some of these older horses that are kind of, to me, are getting the attention, and they deserve the attention as the stars of the moment, aside from 'Tis the Law.
Yeah, like you said, the 3-year-old's almost taken a little bit of a supporting role at this point of the year, just because there's really not been a whole lot for them to shine in, with the Triple Crown being pushed back. Horses like Vekoma just won the Met Mile. Midnight Bizu is maybe the best horse in the world right now. We talked with her owner last week, I believe.
Yeah, Jeff Bloom, yeah.
Maximum Security is training with Bob Baffert right now. And Tom's d'Etat, if I said that right, won the Stephen Foster.
And we're going to talk with his trainer, Al Stall, in just a few minutes.
So it's been an interesting few weeks for these older horses.
Yeah, Vekoma looked great, and Maximum Security has really been training well. And so I don't think that we've heard the last of Maximum Security, and maybe it'll be only positive, good things from here on out for a talented horse. But like we're talking about, this Tom's d'Etat, it was just really impressive in the Stephen Foster, and just behind him was By My Standards. We're going to talk with both those trainers. And, I guess it goes in cycles, doesn't it, guys? You all are sports fans, Some years, some of the usual stars you talk about take a back seat, maybe especially in baseball, which looks like is going to be opening in the next few days. Somebody gets off to a hot start. Maybe you're not always talking about, Mike Trout, for example. Somebody else is playing great right off the bat, pun intended.
That's true, Kenny.
Yeah, I remember especially one that stands out in my mind is Albert Pujols was playing great even into his 40s with the Cardinals.
Yeah. And being a Cardinal fan, I was always been and still am a fan of Albert Pujols. And, it's that way, in sports, it goes in cycles. And I think the trend right now is let's take a look at how some of these older horses are doing. They're the ones getting the most attention because you didn't have that buildup of the Triple Crown prep races, and you didn't go all the way through the natural process. And here we're still talking about a Kentucky Derby that's, 6 weeks away, something like that, a month and a half or so away now. And then we talk about adding to that the Preakness. So a long way to go on that. What we do know for sure is that the older horses, including a 7-year-old Tom's d'Etat, has been in the spotlight, as they should be. And when we come back in just a few moments, we'll talk with Al Stall Jr., who trains this outstanding 7-year-old, and then Bret Calhoun, who trains the very talented By My Standards, will join us later. This is the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Really excited about today's show. A man I've known a long time, a good friend, a terrific trainer, and I saw him briefly to do an interview after his horse was spectacular in the Stephen Foster. He is Al Stall Jr. He has Tom's d'Etat, who is one of, if not the best horse in the country right now. And Al joins us from Churchill Downs, where he's getting ready to pack up and move to Saratoga. Al, good to talk to you.
Oh, good to talk to you, Kenny. You're right. We had a brief exchange the other day. I guess it's better than no exchange at all.
And especially when it's a winning exchange, isn't it?
Oh, I love post-race stuff. Pre-race interviews and talk shows and things are okay, but post-race means something good just happened. So I like them a whole lot better.
And right now you're in the process. You know, what I try to do on this show is people have ideas. Obviously, the horses just don't pop up one day at Saratoga. So you're in the process, as we tape this right now, of packing up at Churchill Downs, and you're going to be up at Saratoga soon, and you're going to be leaving out at the end of this day. So what all does that entail, Al, as what you have to put together and how much help goes into getting these horses moved?
Well, it's if you can, it's almost like if you'd pack up young kids to go on a trip. You have to do everything for the horse and the crew. So right now, if you look down my shed row, there's feed tubs and water buckets and my desk and all the equipment you could ever imagine, and then some. You look up and say, well, I just must have accumulated this stuff over the years, because if I had to buy it all at once, I'd be completely busted. But it's not as complicated as it seems. You basically just load them up and go from point A to point B, and you unload and pack it up again and set everything up. And we've been doing it for a long, long time. It's most probably what I would consider the worst part of our job is the moving around, the shipping and the packing and unpacking. But it's something we're used to, and we obviously know it comes with it.
You've been doing this a long time. Your father, well-known and respected chairman of the Louisiana Racing Commission. I believe you were in high school. You told me once when you started working with Frankie Brothers. Is that right?
That's exactly right. In between semesters like Christmas and certainly obviously summers, the fairgrounds in the winter and Louisiana Downs in the summers, and that's where I got started in the front side betting at the fairgrounds and handicapping, and then the hands-on stuff started during that time with Frankie Brothers. Actually, Frankie Brothers was the assistant for Jack Vanberg when it first started. He hadn't even broken away from Jack the very first year or so, but it's been a while.
Man, that was like the master class, wasn't it? Jack Vanberg and Frankie Brothers being around you?
It was. I mean, Jack had some good up at the same time. He had another assistant trainer called Billy Mott, not too bad. And
he's done okay, yeah?
Yeah. No wonder he's won so many Jack won so many races with those guys underneath him, and so it was a learning experience, and there was a lot of horses in and out, shuffling back and forth, and you get a Harvard education really quick with that bunch.
Well, was there one thing that you learned really early on that's kind of carried through? I mean, is there kind of a thread that you can run through any successful trainer, or a couple of those that if you do this consistently, you'll be okay?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I learned about myself is I just, I remember things that happened in the barn, 35 years ago, when like Dr. Harthill would come in. You might forget what I had for breakfast and stuff, but I just remember things specific to a certain horse, and that has always stuck with me personally. But as far as what you do on a day-to-day basis, is you really don't change a whole lot. I mean, you kind of have to go with the flow somewhat, but if your stable's not running well and you're in a bit of a slump or something, let's get new riders, let's get new feed, let's do, just kind of stay the course. And I learned that the game will cycle around as long as you're getting up and going to work every morning and, doing what you do best. So just to keep at it, most probably, is the thing I learned as much as anything.
And speaking of keeping at it, what a segue here. This 7-year-old you have, Tom Stay Tom, what an incredible horse, impressive in winning the Stephen Foster. He just seems to keep getting better, Al. Is there just a reason for that? Is he just that special?
Well, it's just maybe the combination of everything. He's obviously a brilliant talent, horse-wise. Talent-wise, and he's owned by some very patient people who understood that we at the barn had a whole bunch of confidence in this horse. And every time he'd get kind of a pimple on him, I'd have to call up and say, hey, we need to do this with Tom. He'll need 3 or 4 months off. And they be in GMB, Gail Benson. Mr. Benson was alive when Tom started his career. And actually he's had a couple couple win photos with him, which is kind of special. And they just said, okay, if you think he's that good, we'll ride it out with you. And I guess what happened for him to get in such good form is approximately, it's coming up on almost 2 years now, he's been sound, and we've had some continuity. We got to train him like a regular horse and race him like a regular horse, and he just really dialed in and got as good as his natural ability was going to let him be, which ended up being high, with grade 1 status. So that's the combination. I don't think it's like he's some late bloomer. It was just a little knick-knack things that set him back, and once he got a rhythm, here we are.
Tom with Al Stahl Jr., terrific trainer. Tom Zeta, one of the best horses in the world right now. You were talking about the relationship you have with the owners, now Gail Benson, and, of course, the late Tom Benson, the owner of the Saints and the Pelicans. He's Mr. Sports in New Orleans, your hometown. What's that relationship been like with you and the Benson family over these years?
Oh, it's been great. I kind of knew Mr. Benson. He was in the game when he was a younger guy. He sat next to us at Derby. I couldn't even tell you what year it was, but it was probably in the 80s. Billy Fox was his trainer, which is Tammy Fox's dad. And so he always had an interest in horses. He always had some land. I guess you would call it a ranch, like in Texas, where he kept some thoroughbreds. And then when he got super busy and was wide open working in his banking, real estate, car dealerships, and then, of course, sports franchises, he got away. And then he just circled back around, and his director of communications, or VP of communications and media, came with the idea that 3 New Orleans trainers, myself, Tom Amos, and Dallas Stewart, gave us a little budget, and we all went to the sales and bought some yearlings, and we all got lucky, really. I mean, he's running horses in the Kentucky Derby and the Breeders' Cups and the Pegasus World Cup. I mean, way more than an ordinary person who's came back and been in the game for 8 years. So, but they're really good to work with, and I think the best thing about them is they just give us complete autonomy. We bought the horses. We sent the horses where we wanted to break them when they were young. They came into us when we felt it was time. We ran them when we felt like it was time to run, and there's never been one bit of pressure, and we just got to do what we do best, and that's worked out really well for all 3 of us.
And you mentioned, people ask me about being a Kentuckian like I am. I say, yeah, obviously proud of the horse industry here, and a lot of the talent here that's come through. But as you go down to New Orleans, and you start going down in that Cajun country and talking to some of those jockeys that have come out there, and talking to Al Stahl Jr., who we're talking with now, or Tom Amos, or Dallas Stewart, or Frankie Brothers, as you mentioned, it's pretty amazing the talent that's come out of Louisiana in the horse racing business to me, Al.
Right. Well, Louisiana's a horse state. I mean, there's horses everywhere, and there's racetracks everywhere. So everybody, I think it's like any endeavor. Seems like the earlier you start in it, the better off you are. Like water skiing, or certainly the riders who grew up on horseback, and people like us who grew up around the racetrack, mainly the fairgrounds, being from New Orleans, and it must have something to do with it. And we're extremely proud of our heritage when it comes to the horses, and we're happy to carry the torch, so to speak, and hopefully, there's some younger people coming in behind us. And
are you a season ticket holder for the Saints? You go to the
yes,
Saints?
original, 1967. And of course, not me. I was just, I'm just as old as the team, but
right.
We grew up in the university area, being Tulane University. And if you recall, the Saints' home stadium was Tulane Stadium up until 74, maybe 75, until the Superdome was built. I mean, they had Super Bowls. They had Super Bowls played 3 blocks from my house. Wow. And we literally walk up and buy a ticket for $7. There was empty stands. So we always had Saints tickets. And then as my father got older, and every once in a while, the Saints would open a window up to where you could transfer tickets. And my father had some age on him, and the demand with the Saints being so good post-Katrina, we slid him over into my name, and now my brother and I handle the tickets in the exact same spot for the most part. We've been since the Superdome opened in 74, 75.
Wow, you saw the worst of times and then the best of times.
Oh,
I mean,
no
you
question
had to be
about
a fan.
Yeah, no, it was fun no matter what you did. I mean, we took it in stride. We got so used to just getting pounded all the time, but it really made the rally when things got good that much better. And we actually, my wife and I went to the Super Bowl down in Miami when the Saints won the Super Bowl. Same year, Blame won the Breeders' Cup, so that was a pretty good year for us in the sports world.
Yeah, I want to talk to you more about Blame in just a minute, but there's people going to say, did I hear Al Stahl Jr. correctly? He went to a Super Bowl for $7.
Yeah, I remember Tom Amos has a story how they put tickets on the windshield of a parked car. They were just, I think it was, I can't tell you what years, but we could look it up. The score was 16-6. The Pittsburgh Vikings, cold, damp, nasty, rainy, raw January day in New Orleans, and it just wasn't that crowded. And if you look at some of the highs, you can see empty bleachers and stuff. So yeah, nowadays there's no such thing as an empty seat and a $7 ticket. That's for sure.
We're talking with Al Stahl Jr. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on the Horse Racing Show. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Kenny Rice here. Al Stahl Jr. is with me, who trains, among others, Tom Deton, who might be the best horse out there. I got to qualify that because last week we did talk with Jeff Bloom, the owner of Midnight Bijou. And, naturally, he likes both horses. He thinks he's the best. You probably think yours is the best. Maybe there's a showdown along the way somewhere, Al.
Possibly. I mean, obviously, we went down that road before with Blame and Zenyatta. I'm not necessarily worried about that. We'll take all comers. We're just going to stick to our schedule and train our horse, and we'll if we meet somewhere down the road, whether it's the Whitney or the Breeders' Cup Classic, who knows? But I'm not going to worry about the competition just yet. We're just going to concentrate on our horse.
Yeah, and nobody's throwing down yet. Nobody's saying I'm going to put my mare up against the boys or anything like that. But I thought, as other people want to come to this scenario, that's the first thing I thought of was the 2010 Breeders' Cup Classic. Al trains Blame, who defeats, I guess, America's sweetheart in Zenyatta at Churchill Downs, and it was a terrific race.
Yeah, it was something you dream of. Like I said, same thing. We were focused in on our horse, and of course, everybody knew about Zenyatta, and maybe I underestimated her popularity until she literally darkened the door at Churchill Downs. And next thing you know, the cars were stopped out here on Longfield Avenue because her barn was one of those ones up against the back fence there. And there was like a traffic jam, and there was police, and there was mothers with children. And I mean, it was a scene. I'm like, oh, we might need a bigger boat. And but we just went on with our business, and what happened on the racetrack happened on the racetrack, and we just went on. So it was fun, and we weren't upset by winning that race, that's for sure.
No, and Blame was such a good horse. I mean, kind of, I don't know. People will debate now, should he have been Horse of the Year? It's been a long time, 10 years. Since that was brought up and debated. But, hey, you're a Breeders' Cup Classic winner, as I say. That was the big thing to me.
Right. We ended up winning, we were unanimous. Older horse, handicap horse. So we knew it was going to be tight with the Horse of the Year. And, that's a on paper type award, and prestigious, of course, but we weren't surprised by the outcome. And we're just happy that Blame got to go to a beautiful place and have a great career, which he's done so far in the stud. So everything was great. That never ever crosses my mind whatsoever, the Horse of the Year voting.
We're talking with Al Stahl Jr., and we were talking when the show first started before we brought you on, Al, about how given year, everything being normal, you would be talking about, well, who came out of the Derby, Preakness, or Belmont, who's going on to the Haskell, who's going on, to the Travers or whatever the case might be, and would they be able to hold up, make it to the Breeders' Cup? That's usually because, as you know, the 3-year-olds, I'm talking in a broad brush around the country, get the attention. In the horse business, it's a little different. And I think because of all this, the older horses like Tom's d'Etat has gotten a lot of, by my standards, these are good horses that are getting noticed more. Or maybe it just seems that way to me because there's only been one Triple Crown race this time at this stage.
Well, I agree with that. Also, horse racing is kind of one of the only games in town with the COVID, and a lot of the other leagues are canceled or on hiatus. So obviously everybody's been well documented how the handles have gone, like at Oaklawn Park, and every racetrack is up crazy numbers because of all the attention. Everybody's that's having fun betting horses. I'm hoping it's going to help our game with some of these fans that we might have picked up. Hopefully they stay and realize what a good betting opportunity horse racing is, as opposed to casino or horse football and baseball and things like that. There's so much more to betting on horses than there is those sports. So hopefully they stay around and we go down. We stay popular with a new crowd.
And this looks like it's going to be a terrific year for the older horses. I know there's been some years, usually, might get down to 2 or 3, but it seems like it's going to be, like who knows with Baffert now with Maximum Security when he pops back onto the racetrack, and obviously with your horse, it just seems like there's going to be a lot of depth and a lot of interest.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. It's going to be very exciting. I think it's going to be, with Derby being in such an odd position, I think that's just going to start maybe the ball rolling or the snowball rolling, hopefully downhill, for the fall, which would lead into the Preakness will be after the Derby, and then we're going to creep up on some nice race meets at Keeneland and Churchill then Keeneland, and then Breeders' Cup. So I think from about Labor Day on, I think our sport is going to continue to show itself pretty well.
That's a good point. Everybody knows the Derby. Even if you don't know much about horse racing, you know the Derby, and it will be the focus there. You could do marketing on the side, by the way, Al, for horse racing. What you just said.
Like I said, I've been at it for a long time. So anything to help. Believe me, it's the game I love.
Next up for Tom's d'Etat is going to be the Whitney. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what we're pointing for. Yes, the Whitney's August 1st at Saratoga. It'll be 5 weeks between races, and pretty good timing for us.
And they always say, you count backwards, so you'll be counting backwards from the Breeders' Cup, the first part of November at Keeneland. You get one more race in after the Whitney, then to the Breeders' Cup. Would that be the plan if it works out?
Yeah, we'll after the Whitney, we'll just kind of take it one at a time, and we're not sure. We're not really sure. Keeneland hasn't come out with a schedule yet for their fall stakes. I'm not sure if they're changing the schedule a little bit because of the Derby week and things like that. So, I'm not really sure what we might do, but we're just going to focus in on the one race and see what happens there.
You mentioned about how he's really blossomed in the last couple of years. Is Tom's d'Etat the kind of horse that just seems to really just thrive with just a little bit of rest and he's ready to go again?
Yeah, he's just a great athlete. He's easy to deal with. He's very kind on a day-to-day basis. He's a big, strong stallion. He takes care of himself. My guess is, as well as he ran the other day, it was only his second race in 213 days. To run 200s per second off the track record in his second race in 200 and something days with just a short mile at Oaklawn in April, I thought it was a pretty good race for him. I mean, it caught us all off guard.
Well, I was wondering. I think I even asked you because I'm sitting there going, "Wow!" When he's shooting down the stretch, it's over. I mean, those points in a race where it's over and he's in full charge. And I think I even asked you, and I believe that was your answer. Well, look at the time, because I was wondering if you were surprised by how good he was.
Yeah, I mean, the horse was training great. Everything was good, but the whole idea was to get his first race in and then get a second race and be ready for the rest of the year. So if that's the case, and there's still a little notch for improvement off of that last race, that'll keep me up at night.
Well, before I let you go, and I really appreciate your time, because I know Al's packing up and getting ready to move from Churchill to Saratoga this week. How about that college football championship this past year?
Yeah, that was a day to remember. It was we got some great tickets. My brother and I spent all day together, and the energy before the game in the French Quarter. We had a nice warm day in the middle of January. And it was just so exciting, and the French Quarter was great. The Clemson crowd was a very great, nice crowd, and then to go into the game and have it start off very shaky, and then all of a sudden it was they just started dominating. It was thrilling. I mean, and now if there's no college football season, we'll get to be national championship for 2 full years. So that's even better.
That's what I always love about you. Every time I see you, like at the racetrack and all, especially in the fall, we can talk about your horses, but we talk LSU football. And you know LSU football as well as anybody I know.
Yeah, but I've been doing that as long as I've been doing horse racing. We used to go to Tiger Stadium. I-10 wasn't built all the way. We used to take back roads to get there. So we're going that. Right? Oh, yeah. My father dragged us there since we were little kids.
Well, that's to me, that's one of the most imposing, if you're the visiting team, that's still one of the most imposing venues is coming into Tiger Stadium, especially on a Saturday night to play LSU.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's definitely home field advantage is real down there.
Al, thanks for your time. Best wishes. Congratulations on the success of Tom's D'Etat. Best wishes as you go on to the Whitney coming up in just a few weeks, and safe travels up to Saratoga.
Okay. Anytime, Kenny. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Al Stahl Jr. He has a great one in Tom's D'Etat. We'll be back with more on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Delighted to have Bret Calhoun with us. I've known him a long time. He has one of the top horses out there in By My Standards, who has won 3 out of 4 this year, just coming off a second-place finish to Tom's D'Etat in the Stephen Foster a couple of weeks ago. I got to see that in person. And, Bret, welcome into the show.
Good morning, Kenny.
So how did he come out of the race? By My Standards, he's at Churchill Downs right now. How's everything looking for the rest of his summer?
He bounced out of it very, very well. Actually, better than you would expect after a hard race like that. Tom's Attack kind of got a jump on him. We couldn't go by him, but if you watch the replay, By My Standards galloped out very well and honestly came back a pretty fresh horse.
And, he's been a horse that, I remember last year going into the Kentucky Derby time, had some foot problems, had 9-month layoff. And it's really just seemed to blossom this year.
I agree. He came back into the barn, a bigger, stronger horse. We've always been very high on him, and I think he's putting everything together. He's physically a much more mature horse, and I still think there's some upside to him. I really thought he might pop in those really big numbers in the Stephen Foster. I thought he ran a very, very good race. He ran into a horse that kind of ran a freak race.
He comes back off that 9-month layoff. You were in New Orleans, right? He wins an allowance there before he wins the New Orleans Classic, and then goes on with an incredible performance in the Oakland Handicap. But were you a little nervous at the start of the year, Bret, that it has been 9 months, and I got a lot of confidence in him, but let's see what he can do?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's always a little nervousness there on a horse transitioning from 3 to 4. You know what you're seeing, but until they go out there and do it, you're not 100% convinced of it. And even after his first race, it wasn't the toughest race in the world, the allowance race. And so there was still questions in the back of my mind until he stepped up to stakes competition. And when he stepped up in in a stake there, that gave me a bit more confidence. And then to handle the field over at Oaklawn, that was a very deep, large field. That gave me a lot of hope and a lot of high expectations for the rest of the year.
That's nice to have those expectations, be able to talk about them, isn't it?
Absolutely. For the horse to go out there and perform and confirm what you've been seeing and know that you've got one of the top older horses in your barns, it's a very good feeling.
Now, by my standards, what's going to be next for him?
I think we're going to go to the Whitney. Obviously, that's going to be a really deep quality field, but with the pandemic and everything, there's not a lot of options out there. And that's kind of what we're looking to do with him. We're wanting to win a grade 1 with him, and I think that's our best option. Be a really good group of horses and be a good opportunity for him to try to step up and win one of those.
You know, it's interesting to me, given how the Triple Crowns flipped around this year with the Derby coming up in September and the Preakness in October. Usually this time of the year, you know, because it gets the attention. I'm talking national attention, not just in the industry, but, you know, the casual fan out there knows who ran in the Triple Crown. And they know probably that the Haskell's coming up and that the Jim Dandy and the Travers. But this year, especially with racing being open when so many things were not, you know, I think more people from the casual interest has gotten to be more fans because they've seen By My Standards or Tom's Daytona or Midnight Bizou or, you know, heard about Maximum Security, good or bad. There's been more interest in older horses at this stage than I can remember. And I'm talking in a broad brush, Bret. I'm not talking about in what you do for a living every day.
There's no doubt about it. And I hope the racing industry takes this little time that we've had more focus on our industry and uses it for something positive, and we come out of it with a lot more fans down the road because we've kind of been the only game in town there for a while. And, you know, I think we've made a good showing because we've had very, very competitive races because there was limited racing, so all the horses showed up in the same spots. We've had these very large, extremely competitive fields. I'm talking about down to a maiden race or an A other than, and much less the stakes and graded stakes. They've been extremely deep, quality fields. That's really been interesting to watch for all of us that have been in the game for a long time, and I think the casual fan has started to take note.
Talking with Bret Calhoun, he trains one of the best horses out there, By My Standards. Started in '93, I believe, and I remember like Cactus Ridge and Mr. Nightlinger and Gold Coyote, some of the horses that you've had success with, and kind of followed in the footsteps, right? I mean, it was almost like you were destined to be a trainer. Bret, is that too easy to say?
I don't know that I was destined to be one. You know, I didn't grow up in the industry really, but I was like a typical young kid, was enamored with horses and was always begging my parents to get me a horse, and they were actually just race fans. We didn't have parimutuel wagering in Texas, didn't have that, so they would go to surrounding states, to Arkansas and Louisiana, and I learned to read the racing form as a very young kid and just got very intrigued by the business and loved horses, and it kind of went from that. My dad decided to get some, instead of just getting me a pony, he started in buying some race horses, and that's how it all evolved when I was about probably 11 or 12 years old. My parents really didn't want me to pursue a career in it. They knew it was kind of a tough game, a tough road, and I always knew I wanted to do it, and went to college and stayed involved in it as best I could in college, and took a job out of college. And yeah, you know, I always wanted to do this, and I was pretty obsessed with it. And after about 4 or 5 years in a 9-to-5 job, I ended up in the business, and I've been doing it for about 27 years. It's been great to me. Been a lot of ups and downs, as there is in this business, and wonder how in the heck I'm still in it after some of those times. But I couldn't be happier to be in this business.
Well, you keep, and especially, you know, I guess because every now and then a horse like By My Standards comes along, right? That's like any trainer's dream is, you know, that horse will come along that keeps everybody motivated in the barn.
Well, it sure helps you get up at 4:30 7 days a week. I'll tell you that. You got something to look forward to when you have a horse like that.
We're talking with Bret Calhoun. He trains by my standards. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Bret right here on the Horse Racing Show. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice talking with Bret Calhoun. He trains by my standards. We were talking about how the older horses, racing in general, getting more attention because they were the only game in town for a while. You know, your Texas Red Raiders, we don't know if they're going to be playing or not this year, Bret. I believe Texas Tech Red Raiders, right?
That's correct.
I learned knowing Texans over the years, you don't mess up their schools. You don't say Texas Christian or Texas A&M for Texas Tech.
A very competitive fan base there for sure.
But, you know, while we wait to see what happens on that, you're pointing by my standards to run in the Whitney where he would have a rematch with Tom's Detente, and who knows who else is going to be there. It's going to be a deep field. Do you start planning out now maybe another race down the road, what you're looking at before you would go on to the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland the 1st of November?
Yeah, you do kind of have in the back of your head, you've kind of got some things mapped out. And, you know, the main thing is we need to try to win a grade 1 with this horse. And there's not a lot of those out there. So part of it is trying to win a grade 1, and part of it is trying to keep your horse as fresh as you can for the end of the year championship there. So, you know, you've got the Whitney, and then you could possibly come back in a race at Churchill Downs on Derby Week, which is strange for me to be saying Derby Week since it's in September. But, you know, that's something you could do. That would be probably 2 months in between that and the Breeders' Cup. Or you find something else after that. And one of the thoughts about the race at Churchill is it'd be home out of his own stall, and wouldn't be as much wear and tear and stress traveling, and just keep him a little fresher for the end of the year. So we've got, you know, several ideas. Nothing's in stone. We're looking forward to taking on the top horses again in the Whitney, and hopefully we can prevail. I know I'm just guessing Shug will be pointing a code of honor there. I think he'll be one of the ones to be in there, Tom's Detente. And then there'll be plenty more top horses in there.
Yeah, it's kind of like every, not that it hasn't always been that way in the past, but it seems this year more than ever, it's like All-Star Weekend. You know, I was watching the Met Mile the other day. It's like the All-Star Weekend, and I think all the races are going to be that way all the way up to the Breeders' Cup this time.
Absolutely. I think if you can win one of those races in this day and age, you're truly a top horse, because it's not any of these 4, 5, 6 horse fields. These are 12 horse fields loaded with talent.
You've been doing this since '93. What's some of the biggest changes you've noticed in the way that horses are trained, and ownership groups especially? You know, there's not a whole lot of single owners, not a lot of family owners, and then there's not a lot of horses that are racing 8, 10 times a year like maybe they had in the past, or 7 or 8 times a year, which wouldn't have been out of the question.
Yeah, to start on that, I'm not sure why horses aren't racing more these years, these days. You know, I think part of it is, you know, the racing is spread out, the population is down a little bit. A lot of times you can't get races to fill. Once they win a maiden race or an AO, then it becomes more and more difficult to find a race. So I think that's part of it. And then has been some soundness issues. You know, everybody can talk about breeding, and maybe they're not quite as sound as they used to be. But I think also it's a little bit different in the fact that they used to, you know, lay up in the winter and they turn horses out for the winter, long periods of time, and they'd race hard from spring through fall. So there's a lot of variables there. As far as the ownership, that's been a great thing for our industry, that all these partnership groups have come on. We've got lots and lots more owners out there that might own pieces of horses, and then they learn the business, and sometimes they go out on their own and purchase horses on their own, and then there's more people that come in on the partnership side. So I think that's been very, very positive for the industry. It is an expensive business, and it allows people to kind of own a franchise. You know, people love the sports, and they love to be a part of it. And, you know, to own a NFL franchise, you got to be a billionaire. So, you know, you can own a small piece of a racehorse for a small cost and be involved.
You mostly trade for ownership groups these days. Is that right?
I've got a very diverse group of owners. I've got some partnerships, but I have a lot of single owners, and then and some of them team up together at times. So it's a pretty diverse group.
And I guess that always keeps it interesting, doesn't it?
No doubt. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. And there's a lot of different people that do different things, and got the new guys that are just coming in and learning, and the guys that been there, done that. So yeah, it keeps it pretty interesting.
I tell people, in some of the other sports I cover, I say, go to the racetrack sometime. I said, it's fascinating. You might run into a CEO. You might run into a country music star. You might run into a banker or an ex or maybe a current football star that are all owning a horse and competing against each other. And I don't think you're going to find that in too many other walks of life.
No, it is. It's very interesting. You can find all walks of life in this industry. And that's what makes it great. It's very diversified. And the guy that doesn't have a lot of money, he can hit the home run ball. I mean, sometimes, an inexpensive horse comes through. He wasn't, the best looking yearling or the most mature at that time. Next thing you know, is a 3-year-old, he's developed and becomes a top horse. Money sure helps you in this business, but it's no guarantee.
Ain't that the truth? People will ask sometimes, they probably ask you too, well, you get $1 million horse, you probably win the Derby. And I tell them only one horse that ever sold for $1 million, Fusaichi Pegasus, won the Derby. Now some have earned $1 million that's come into the race with the 2-year-old purses increasing, but only one horse, and he sold for $4 million. I said, if that were the case, then every horse that sold for 7 figures should probably win the Derby.
Absolutely. There's a great equalizer in this business. And like I said, money, the amount of money you spend, a lot of times will help put the percentages and the odds in your favor, but it's no guarantee. You can spend $1 million on a horse and he might not have any talent. You can spend $50,000 on one, and next thing you know, he turns out to be a champion.
By my standards, when will he go up to leave for Churchill to move on up to Saratoga, Bret?
Kenny, I think we'll stay at Churchill Downs until right before the race. Sometimes there'll be some guidelines they force you in to come at a certain time, but I'll probably come in as close to race time as allowed. I really don't want to change surfaces on him or anything. And he's content, and he knows this track well and comfortable over it. I've watched Bob ship in there for years and do well. At one time, I always thought you needed to train over that track to be successful, and I've seen a lot of guys over the last few years ship in right on top of the races and do well. And this horse is a very intelligent horse. Got a great mind on him, and shipping to Oaklawn was really the first test I had with him to ship and run him, and he handled it very well. So I think we're going to do the same thing.
Well, that sounds great. Bret, it's been good. You catch up, and I look forward to doing this again, and best wishes with By My Standards the rest of the way.
Thanks a lot, Kenny.
Thank you. Bret Calhoun trains By My Standards, going to have another showdown with Tom's Daytona, it looks like, in the Whitney, and that's going to be a great race, a deep field. We'll be back with more here on the Horse Racing Show right after this. All right, getting ready to wrap up this week. Al Stahl Jr., thank you. Thank you, Bret Calhoun. They both have terrific older horses. And as Al Stahl told us growing up just a few blocks from Tulane Stadium, Thomas, what was that Super Bowl? I believe it was Super Bowl IX that he said he got a $7 ticket to?
Yeah, that's right. It was Super Bowl IX. The Steelers and the Minnesota Vikings. Almost said Baltimore, but that was Super Bowl IX.
Wow.
In 1975.
How about that? And he said that people were getting tickets for $7. They won't believe it, will they? And that was the third time it was at Tulane Stadium. All right, that's our horse racing show with some football thrown in. Ben Chaffins, thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thomas Kenny, thank you as always.
Thanks, Kenny.
And thank you all for joining us. I'm Kenny Rice. I look forward to talking to you again next week on the Horse Racing Show.